family reunion was great until I found out my dad emptied my bank account.
That night, I sat alone in my apartment, lit only by the pale glow of my laptop screen, the digits 8by6前心裏騷動 burning into my eyes. But it wasn't just a number, it was what it meant. I minimized the banking tab and opened my email, a compulsion, a desperate reach for answers. I searched payments confirmation. What poured in was a timeline of betrayal. Rent payments I didn't authorize, flight bookings I never took, and Amazon orders that made my stomach churn, luxury candles, streaming services I never used, groceries delivered to a zip code across town. Then I saw it, a credit alert from 2 years ago. I had ignored it back then, thinking it was a clerical error. But when I opened the file, my heart dropped. A credit card opens in my name. The first charge, a new iPad delivered straight to Stacy's apartment. I remembered confronting her. She didn't deny it, just laughed, swirling iced coffee. You aren't using your credit. I figured it wouldn't hurt. But it did. It bled me slowly, not in dollars, but in dignity. I remember the night she called me crying about Lily's pneumonia, how I sent $600 without hesitation. 3 days later, a TikTok appeared. Lily in a hotel robe, twirling by the pool. No trace of sickness, no trace of shame. It wasn't just one lie, it was an entire system built on my silence. I sat there, pulling my knees to my chest, realizing this was never a moment, it was a history. I had been financing their comfort for years while convincing myself it was kindness. But kindness without consent is exploitation. And as the quiet hummed around me, I knew this was never about money. It was about how invisible I'd let myself become.
The moment I opened my banking app, something inside me cracked. I blinked at the screen. $87.10. I refreshed, hoping it was some glitch, but the numbers stayed. Less than 22 hours ago, that account held over $14,000. My chest tightened. I knew I transferred my bonus. I had double-checked it. My fingers hovered over the laptop as if willing the money back. Then, like a slow bleed of realization, I opened the transaction history. 3 massive withdrawals. My parents' IP address, that familiar Wi-Fi, that familiar betrayal. And when I confronted my father, he didn't even flinch. He just shrugged and muttered, "We needed it." Like I was the irrational one, like this was expected. A scream rose in my throat but never made it out. I stood there in my own home, robbed by blood. And I realized it wasn't the theft that shattered me. It was how little they cared.
As the shock pulsed through me, memories, fragments I had buried, began to surface like bruises rising to the skin. It wasn't just this one betrayal, it was a pattern I had refused to name. A week before the reunion, my sister Stacy called, voice trembling. "Megan, I hate asking, but Lily needs school supplies, just $300." I wired it without blinking. 2 days later, she posted a photo on Instagram, fresh nails, mimosas, brunch with the caption, "Self-Care Sunday." I swallowed the sting then, told myself maybe someone else had treated her. But now, those excuses dissolved like sugar in boiling water. Then came the buried memory of the iPad, a credit card opened in my name, an address matching Stacy's. I had once dismissed the death notice as a mistake, but when I traced the IP address to my parents' house, the same one used to drain my bank account, the truth locked into place. My mother, Linda, had once cooed, "Not everyone is good with money like you, sweetie." At the time, it felt like praise, but now it reeked of justification. Every loan, every favor disguised as an emergency, none of them were accidents. They were expectations, assumptions. I was the responsible one, the default safety net they never asked for but always used. And the worst part, they didn't even ask, not this time, no heads up, no explanation, just a silent decision made behind my back. I wasn't family to them. I was a resource, a walking vault they'd learned how to crack. The splinters in my chest from Stacy's voice, from Linda's smile, from Dad's shrug, now they weren't splinters, they were knives, and they had always been there. I had just been too loyal to feel the bleeding.
The next morning, I didn't hesitate. I drove straight to my mother's house, each mile feeling heavier than the last. The sky was overcast, the air damp with a tension that clung to my skin. When Pamela opened the door, her expression wavered between confusion and dread. "Is Darlene here?" I asked, my voice sharp. "She's in the kitchen," Pamela replied softly, already sensing that this wasn't a social call. I didn't wait for an invitation. Darlene was sipping coffee at the counter, barefoot, wrapped in a robe, completely unbothered. "I know what you told Addison," I said. She didn't even flinch. "What are you talking about?" "About the iPad, the phone, the credit card. You made her lie to me." Her eyes narrowed, a smirk curling at the edge of her mouth. "She doesn't know how to keep her mouth shut, does she?" That one sentence, so casual, so cold, ignited something in me. "She's Ken, Darlene. She's not your alibi. She's not your pawn. You're poisoning her." "Don't bring my kid into this," she snapped, her voice dropping to a hiss. "You brought her in the moment you used her to shield your lies." Pamela stepped in, hands raised, pleading. "Girls, please, this isn't helping." "No, Mom," I said, turning on her. "It would help if you stopped pretending this isn't serious." From down the hall, Ricky appeared, already defensive. "This is all going too far. You're tearing this family apart over some cash and bad choices." "No," I said, trembling but steady. "You don't get to say family after what you've done, after what you've allowed." I reached into my bag, pulled out a thick envelope, and handed it to Pamela. "This was filed 2 days ago. All 3 of you are named. This is no longer personal. It's legal." For the first time, Darlene went pale. Pamela's hands shook. Ricky said nothing. I looked at them, at the ruins of the roles they used to play, and said, "If you won't stop this, the court will." Then I walked out, because I wasn't just fighting back. I was breaking the cycle.
I didn't sleep that night. The silence of my apartment was deafening, broken only by the soft hum of the refrigerator and the noise in my head, looping every moment I had ignored, every time I swallowed my discomfort in the name of peace. At sunrise, I began compiling the proof. Printouts of my bank statements, fraudulent loan documents, screenshots of Darlene's text messages, credit alents I'd once deleted without question. Each page felt like peeling back a layer of my own denial. I titled the folder, "Family Debt, Do Not Ignore," and placed it on my kitchen table like a loaded weapon. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was determined. This wasn't a tantrum. This was a reckoning. By 6:45 that evening, I pulled up across from my parents' house. I didn't park in the driveway. This wasn't a visit. This was a confrontation. I walked up their porch steps with the folder tucked under my arm, feeling the breeze twist around my ankles like warning fingers. Linda opened the door, still wearing her apron, her eyes flickering between surprise and worry. "You didn't say you were coming," she murmured. "I'm not here to eat." The living room was exactly as I left it, cozy, familiar, suffocating. Dad sat on the couch with a soda, ESPN murmuring in the background. Stacy scrolled on her phone without looking up. I dropped the folder on the coffee table. The sound cracked through the room. "What's that?" Dad asked. "Proof," I said, "and the last time I'll explain anything." I opened to the first page. "You co-signed a personal loan in my name. I didn't sign this. You committed fraud." Dad didn't deny it. He just blinked and muttered, "You left your social on that tax form. I needed it fast." I could feel the rage tighten behind my eyes, but I stayed calm. "You used me, and now I'm giving you 48 hours to remove my name from every document, or I report it. No more silence." The room didn't erupt. It caved. No one apologized. They just stared, like I was the villain. but I didn't flinch. Not this time.
2 days passed. Nothing. No calls, no texts, no half-hearted apologies or guilt-laced voicemails, just silence. Gold. Calculated. It was their oldest tactic, make me question if I was overreacting. But this time, it didn't work. This time, the silence sharpened me. I wasn't the same woman they thought they could wear down. When Pamela finally reached out, it wasn't to apologize, it was a text. Lunch at 1 tomorrow. Just us. Let's talk like family. Just us, code for no witnesses. Code for manipulation behind closed doors. But I went. Not for reconciliation, for closure. I arrived at 12:59. The table was already set for 4. So much for just us. Ricky nodded like this was a business meeting. Darlene sipped her sweet tea, unbothered. Pamela placed a dish of rolls at the center, smiling too tightly. We thought this would be a good chance to reset, clear the air. I didn't sit. I placed a manila envelope squarely on my plate. You already tried to clear it with lies, I said. Then I dropped the first print out, a screenshot of Pamela's text to Aunt Debbie, dated 2 days after I confronted them. She offered to help. It wasn't like we took it without her knowing. The room stilled. I stared each of them down. Let me be very clear, I didn't offer anything. You stole from me, then lied about it to protect your image. Darlene scoffed. You're blowing this way out of proportion. No, I said. You just got too comfortable thinking I'd never speak up. I pulled out a second envelope, the name of my attorney on the front. This is a cease and desist, effective immediately. One more lie, one more charge in my name, and I take everything legal, everything public. Pamela reached for the envelope, but hesitated. Ricky opened his mouth, then closed it again. For the first time, I saw it. Fear. Not of losing me, but of being exposed. And that's when I knew I had finally taken back the power.
I should felt relief. I should felt vindicated for delivering that envelope. But instead, what lingered was a bitter weight. 3 days passed in silence. Again, but this time the silence didn't feel like a retreat. It felt like a setup. Then came the knock. Addison stood there, backpack slung over one shoulder, one shoelace untied, her curls a tangled halo around her face. "Hi, Aunt Megan," she chirped. "Mom said I'm sleeping over tonight." I blinked. Darlene hadn't called, hadn't texted, just dropped her daughter at my door like I was some unpaid on-call nanny. Again. Did she say when she'd be back? "Nope," Addison said cheerfully. "She said I could stay as long as you want me." It wasn't a sleepover. It was strategy. Guilt wrapped in innocence. A pawn wrapped in pink glitter and trust. We made cookies, we watched baking shows. Addison giggled like the world had never lied to her. But it all shattered when she held up her tablet. "Mom said not to tell you about the iPod." My breath hitched. "What do you mean?" She said Grandma bought it, but really, Mom got it with the card she keeps hidden. The one she said came from you. Her voice was casual, sweet, oblivious. And then, she also said not to talk about my new phone. She said it's better if you think it's a gift. The tray in my hands trembled. The frosting on the cookies blurred. I stared at this child, this innocent mirror of Darlene, and I realized the full depth of the damage. It wasn't just money. It wasn't even about me anymore. Darlene was molding her daughter in her image, teaching her to lie, teaching her that deceit is survival and manipulation is normal. That night, I tucked Addison into bed on my couch. She smiled and mumbled something about sprinkles before falling asleep. I stood there, staring down at her peaceful face, heart aching. I wasn't just confronting a toxic family now. I was witnessing the birth of another. And I knew exactly what I had to do next. The line I had drawn to protect myself now had to protect Addison too. This wasn't a family issue anymore. It was a legacy I refused to let repeat. The silence didn't come with slamming doors or raised voices. It came quietly, like fog rolling in through the cracks of my life. After I filed the papers and walked away from that house, I told myself it was the last time, and I meant it. But nothing prepared me for the stillness that followed. No texts, no calls, no sudden appearances, just a vast, hollow absence, as if they had all agreed to pretend I never existed. At first, it hurt. The child in me still wanted her mother to call, still longed for some kind of apology. But by the third day, I saw it for what it was: punishment. Their silence was a weapon sharpened with years of emotional manipulation. I started to rebuild not just my finances, but my life. I worked late, walked more, drank tea in silence instead of bracing for conflict. I watered the succulents I always forgot about. I let the quiet breathe. Then the voicemail came. Pamela's voice was tired, uncertain. "We never meant to hurt you. We just always assumed you'd be there." She didn't apologize. She asked for peace. Translation: she wanted silence again. She wanted me to forget, to fold. I didn't. I deleted the message without a second thought. The click of it vanishing felt louder than any argument we'd ever had. They thought cutting me off would make me crawl back. Instead, I stood taller. Because sometimes the scariest thing isn't their anger, it's their indifference. And it reminded me why I left. That silence they tried to use as punishment, it became my freedom.
3 tháng đã trôi qua since I walk away, and still not a single word. No confrontations, no apologies. Just a vacuum where my family used to be. I had moved to Eugene, Oregon by then, a small second-floor apartment on a tree-lined street where the neighbors nodded but didn't ask questions. I told myself I had found peace, that I had escaped. But the wounds don't vanish just because you've changed your address. One morning, as I was clearing my inbox, a subject line caught my eye. For what it's worth. It was from Marcy, my quiet cousin, the one who had always watched from the sidelines. Her message was short, but it detonated something inside me. "Lorraine, I don't expect a reply, but I want you to know you did the right thing. I've watched them use you for years. You gave me permission to rethink my silence. Whatever they say about you now, I know the truth." I read it again and again and again. Then I broke. Not from pain, not from anger, but from finally being seen. I cried the kind of tears that don't sting, the kind that cleanse. Quiet, steady sobs in a kitchen filled with morning light. For the first time in years, I wasn't mourning what I'd lost. I was grieving what I'd never had. A family that truly valued me. Later that week, another envelope arrived. No return address. Inside was a check for $1,200 and a small folded note. It was from Kelly, Darlene's ex-husband's sister. "You stood up when the rest of us shut up. You were brave. Brave. Not selfish, not dramatic. Brave." I held the check, stunned, not by the amount, but by the acknowledgement. For once, someone named the price I'd paid, and someone said thank you. That day, I didn't just feel vindicated. I felt powerful. Because sometimes healing doesn't begin with justice. It begins with someone saying, "I saw what they did, and you didn't deserve it."
The check stayed on my windowsill for days, untouched. It wasn't the money that moved me. It was what it represented: validation, proof that someone, somewhere, knew the truth. But the real reckoning came the night I sat alone in my apartment with a blank sheet of paper. I didn't open a laptop. I didn't draft an email. I reached for a pen because some truths need to bleed out slowly. I didn't address it to anyone, not Darlene, not Pamela, not Ricky. I wrote it for myself. You don't owe silence to anyone who harms you, not even if they share your blood, not even if they once tucked you in at night. You have every right to leave. You are not cruel for protecting your peace. The words flowed like I had been holding them in for years, because I had. I folded the note carefully, placed it in my nightstand drawer, not to save it, but to anchor it, to remind myself that walking away wasn't abandonment. It was survival. Later that evening, I stood on my balcony with a mug of tea. The sky faded into lavender dusk, the kind that hums with possibility. I looked out at the rooftops, at the way the wind moved the trees like waves, and whispered into the quiet. I didn't lose a family. I lost a cage. It was the first time I believed it. The first time I didn't feel guilt clinging to my ribs like a parasite. Because what they called love was never love. It was control wrapped in tradition, and obligation, and shame. And silence? Silence only ever taught them how far they could push me. Not anymore. I had found my voice, and I wasn't going back.
It happened on a Tuesday morning, quiet, unassuming, like most turning points in life. My lawyer called with the update. The fraudulent loan my father had opened in my name? Closed, wiped from my record. The damage they tried to bury me under was slowly being undone, one signature at a time. But then came the next envelope. This time, it wasn't from a bank. It was from the state's investigation unit. Darlene's accounts were under review. Suspicious transfers, overlapping beneficiaries, forged documents. And my mother's name was listed, not as a bystander, but as someone who had willfully omitted reporting fraud. She knew. Of course she knew. I stood in my kitchen, the sunlight pouring in like it was mocking me. For a second, I thought I might vomit, not out of fear, but from the sheer weight of confirmation. It had never been just Darlene. It had never been just one bad choice. It was a system, a quiet, generational betrayal dressed up as family loyalty. Still, not a single call, not even a half-hearted excuse. I waited, thinking surely someone would say something. But the silence stretched into days. They weren't sorry, they were just dismissive. Like I was the one who had overreacted. Like I was the villain for exposing the truth. One night, I found myself on the floor, wine glass in hand, flipping through old solo albums. Christmas mornings, birthday candles, Addison in her pumpkin costume, cheeks puffed with laughter. I didn't burn them. I didn't scream. I just quietly placed them in a box, taped it shut, and slid it into the closet. I wasn't erasing the past. I just refused to let it define my future. Because when they looked at me, they didn't see a daughter, a sister, a woman. They saw a resource, an account to drain, a silence to exploit. But I wasn't silent anymore. And the only thing more dangerous than a woman who's being used is the one who finally says, enough.
Sunday morning arrived like a whisper. Gray skies, gentle breeze, the kind of calm that usually signaled healing. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and stepped out onto the porch, coffee in hand. It should have felt peaceful. Instead, it felt like the edge of something final. Then came the voicemail. Pamela's voice played softly through my phone speaker, hesitant, careful. Lorraine, we never meant to hurt you. We always thought you'd be there. Your sister's not doing well. Can't we just stop this? There it was. Not remorse, not ownership, just another plea for silence, wrapped in guilt, tied with shame. I didn't hesitate. I hit delete. The click echoed louder than her words. Later that week, an unmarked envelope arrived. Inside, a check for $1,200 and a note from Callie, Darlene's ex-husband's sister. I saw what they did. You stood up when no one else did. You were brave. That word, brave, it stayed with me. Not selfish, not dramatic, not overreacting, brave. And for the first time, I believed it. I didn't just escape them, I freed myself. I sat at my desk and wrote a letter, not to them, not to anyone, to me. You don't owe silence to anyone who harms you. You have every right to leave, even if they share your last name. I folded it, placed it in my nightstand, a reminder that boundaries aren't betrayal, they are survival. That evening, I returned to the balcony. The sky dipped into deep lavender, and as the last light sank behind the trees, I whispered something I never dared say aloud until now. I didn't lose a family, I lost a cage. No one called, no one chased, and for the first time in my life, I didn't chase either. I sipped my tea slowly, watching the steam curl into the night air and let the last thread of guilt unravel. Free, final, and no longer mine to carry.